There we are.
Peace and love.
Yeah.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. How are you today? If that's not a very challenging question, which it can be these days.
I feel like when we're asking each other that question now, it has so much energy to it. It's not just a passing, how are you doing? It's a, how are you coping?
Yeah, I've always struggled with that question because I'm slightly spectrumish. When people ever ask me, like they do in just, sort of general chit chat way, people say, "Hi, how are you doing?" I always have this problem because I can't just say, "Oh yeah, fine." It's like if they're asking me that, I want to answer it, but to answer it would be completely not what was being asked because I wouldn't want to kind of unpack this whole raft of trouble or even inspiration or because it's too much for that particular moment, because what they're actually doing is just connecting in and saying, "Hi, I'm here, you're there, let's energetically meet." So I often get confused by the question because I try to answer it.
Yeah, it's not really a question, is it? I mean, it depends who's asking you, and if you've got time, if you're sort of sitting with a friend and having a coffee or a tea, and they say, "How are you?" That's the time to really go into it. But when it's just a passing, "How are you doing? How are you doing?" That seems to be something that people say a lot.
Yeah, I probably say that. I do it myself, and I ask people, and I don't actually mean it. So I'm guilty of it too. I wonder what a nicer way
Hi.
of meeting would be. Hi, hello. Yeah. Who are you? Should be the question, right?
No, that's so intense. If anyone asked you that now, probably everyone would just fall apart, start crying.
Yeah.
Which may be needed.
I
Maybe
think
that's your job, but this time, who are you? And then being there to just like hold them if they break
down. With people, who are you is probably a really useful thing to ask, because we always kind of have this set idea of who someone is, and of course we're all changing all the time. So when you meet someone you know quite well, it's probably good to find out who they are so that you can update rather than hold on to the baggage of what you think they are.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, isn't it? You'd have to be in a certain place within yourself to be able to be present with that. You'd have to have done the work to understand.
I'd have to be somebody else.
You have to be someone, who's done the work to understand that question. Because there is a lot of coping and layers of protection that are all at the moment being really tested and asked to be dissolved, but it's whether people are going to allow that to happen or if they're going to struggle and fight on. And it's been such a time. I mean, there's been so many deaths that I've heard of just continually through different people. Like, oh, this person's not well, this person's died, this person's got this. And it just feels like there's a lot of exiting, there's a lot of souls exiting. That's how it feels, because it's so intense. Like, I mean, it's always happening like that, really, but it's just amplified at the moment with everything that we're going through. And I think people are really feeling because they've had to feel. So the kind of collective energy is a lot more all over the place because people are coming to terms with things and feeling into places that maybe they hadn't gone before. It feels quite chaotic energetically.
And with Christmas coming up as well, which is always a very emotional time for a lot of people, and a lot of the like the veil that covers the wounding in people gets very thin at Christmas, and the rawness rises up ordinarily anyway. And then after the year we've just had, with everything that's going on, that at the same time, it's really, it's going to be quite a ride the next few weeks, I feel, for a lot of people. But and not such a bad thing as well, because this is the sort of unlooked for side effect of all the control and the consolidation of power, and the bizarre reaction to this virus has been to kind of unwittingly take the entire world's population, or pretty much most of it, on a kind of forced retreat, on a kind of forced therapy course of some kind, or to drive people so far into their addictions or their pain that it either destroys them, or hopefully there's an opportunity to break through, or I don't know, but it has been like this incredible, and it's like a mental illness, but there's this massive potential for healing in it, because it's just you can't hide anymore in yourself, you can't push down the demons anymore. It's like everything's being drawn out and conjured up by the circumstances. And maybe that's what happens when there's a profound cultural shift going on, or a profound extinction, which, perhaps the two look very similar. But there's such a rawness, Obviously there's massive projection in what I'm saying. And maybe most people are just like, yeah, well, I wasn't in work for 6 months and got paid like most of my wage, and I've been having a lovely time. Did some decorating in the house, quite looking forward to Christmas, might see the family again. So maybe I'm completely because of my own circumstances, thinking that, projecting that onto the world. There's probably very much a bit of that, I'm sure. It's hard to tell. I don't know. It's hard to tell. It looks like chaos to me when I look around the world, and I see a lot of people going through it. But there probably are masses of people who are very much plugged into the system, who had a bit of a holiday this year. Well, I'm good. Thank God somebody did,
Yeah, it's all relative, isn't it? But there's definitely a collective energy, whether people are awake to it or not. And I feel like those of us who have been facing a lot of this and doing the work for the last 5 years, it's like it's really, really meaning that we've kind of got to this new place. And that's what I'm feeling in my life. It's like another round. It feels like I'm being born again, like fully born again into a new person. And this portal with the full moon eclipse kind of almost just took everything, and now I've had to kind of like work with that and just wake up and go, who am I today, what's going on today, and just sort of get through it, because there's another eclipse on the 14th and then the solstice on the 21st, and I was reading up about it and how this is just such a powerful time for change. And just keep having to wake up and just go, what today?
So maybe talk a bit more about what you mean by these eclipses, and energetically, or what you're kind of reading.
Well, it's because
feeling rather into that.
We're awakening to the age of Aquarius. So we're coming into a completely different age, and Aquarius symbolizes rethinking and liberation, and it's more about individuality.
So what I got half a kind of bit of information about the ages, like the age of Aquarius. It's a massive cycle of time in which, is it the sun that's moving through the different constellations, or because I don't know, I know we've got all these orbits going on. Now this is total ignorance. Oh, are you still there? Because
I'm here.
something on my system has interrupted.
Oh.
Got rid of my screen. Hang on. Where is it?
I can see you.
Yeah, but everything's gone. There was some kind of notification from a piece of software, and it's just stolen my screen. Where is it? Here it is. Sorry about that. Yeah, maybe we need to look that up. But
Astrologers maintain that an astrological age is a product of the Earth's slow precessional rotation and lasts for
yeah.
2,160 years on average.
Right. So there are in over that 2,160 years, there's something to do with our positioning where we're going through the various constellations, right?
Yeah, we're moving from the age of Pisces into the
Okay.
Aquarius advancements. So it's interesting because I have an Aquarius rising. So Aquarius energy is, I know I'm comfortable with it.
What does that mean for those who don't know, like me? What is the rising sign?
It's really interesting because my friend Roma, who I'm with in London at the moment, is Aquarius. And I find it really helpful because I get to see myself from that, you know, perspective of viewing someone else. And then you're like, wow, is that what I'm like as well? So I always find it really a good learning because Aquarius is individual, is kind of quite lone wolf like, free thinking, likes to do everything alone. Very like,
When you say they're like this, you mean as a primary star sign, these are the characteristics?
it's just the characteristics of Aquarius. So each sign, it doesn't matter where it is in your chart. I mean, it will. It will matter to a degree of how much you are like that. Where Aquarius is my rising sign, so it means that that's the way I act in the world.
Okay.
So that's the way I kind of come across. Which
So it's like you have your main star sign, which is a
your
product
sun
when
sign.
you were your sun sign. That's when you were born, the
Yeah.
time of the year, and that comes from the position of the constellations in the sky at that time of year, which is relates to that processional thing. This is where these are the kind of observed origins of astrology, right? They're not just made up completely, which I know perhaps some kind of more scientific minds think, oh, it's all just made up. There is a kind of relationship with, the procession of constellations in the sky throughout the year. So that's your main sign, which I have some kind of understanding of because a lot of the kind of characteristics of Taurians, which is what my star sign, totally fit with me. So that there's definitely a feeling or a lived experience of mine that those things have some bearing. So what it sounds like you're saying is that you also have a relationship with all the other constellations which have a kind of probably to do with the year you were born and the time and all of that. They have a kind of secondary effect on you, and one of those things is your rising sign. Is that like the second most influential part?
Yeah, I mean, there's the moon as well, which is very
Right.
important. So
So
those,
does that derive from the phase of the moon at the time of your birth or something like that? Or
yeah,
okay.
I think so. It's funny when I used to, because my mum had a book when I was young that she'd get out when all my friends came round, was like, right, what time were you born? Where were you born? Um, and then people would always have to call up their parents and be like, what time was I born? Because she'd be so like insistent that we would find out. And yeah, so I've kind of just grown up with it and kind of just feeling it as well intuitively, and then reading more into it And also just when you meet people, it's really interesting. Those who you feel really comfortable with normally have some kind of connection with the star signs, in your chart, or there are certain star signs that work together and don't, because, energetically, air, water, fire, the signs are all kind of related to those elements. So, like you would say, you're an earth element as a Taurus, so you find fire challenging
Yeah.
because earth and fire.
Yeah. So fire bakes my clay, turns me into brick, makes me go hard and brittle and dry. And it's so interesting because I have had that experience with fiery people,
Yeah.
And the other way, you're talking about Aquarius, water sign. Like I've had amazing girlfriends in the past who were Aquarians, and that wateriness kind of
That's air, it's not water.
turns my. Oh, it's air. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There you go. That's bullshit.
Double check, but I always, yeah, there we go. Now we proved our point really well, haven't we?
So, well, all right. Yeah, but this is it though, because it is flawed, like any human system. It's not, it's not absolute truth, or there are levels to it. Well, there you go. This is really important. Let's make a bit of space for this moment, because this is so pertinent right now. We have these belief systems, we have these ideas of what reality is, and we live our lives kind of built on these things. And then there are moments like that. For my hope, for like the last 30 years or whatever it's been, I've believed Aquarius was a water sign. I mean, Aquarius, the name. So and so I've made up this story that, oh yeah, water signs, they make me sort of soft, and they turn my clay into something more slippy and juicy and slidey and flowy, And it's completely untrue. And this is happening all the time with all of us. We're forming these ideas of what things are, believing in them, and going to war with each other over them. And they may not be true. And if you don't have a capacity to just go, oh, fuck, that's not true, and admit it to yourself, then you can get really stuck into some desperate situations. So I want to flag that up and show that I'm totally wrong about that. So now I have to create a new story. Like, what? Okay.
Yeah, but it makes sense. They're also represented by the water bearer because they give knowledge to the world. So there is an element of water.
Yeah, sounds like you're trying to bodge it there to me. It doesn't fit.
Also, air would also help you, because when you get too deep in that,
air lifts
air
me
will
with
come
my
and
heavy stuckness, right?
Yeah.
I definitely, as an earthy person, I do get stuck. It's easy for me to kind of root, and I get a lot of good sustenance from rooting and being grounded. So what air does, that kind of levity, it sometimes, because I know airy people who fucking challenge me so much because they're so light, and and their kind of wishy-washy non-committalness can drive me nuts, or they're so light that I can't get anything concrete out of them. That can be challenging, but they soften me, because I've got some good friends who are like that, who they just kind of they make me a bit more buoyant.
Yeah.
And I appreciate them for that,
It's interesting because I'm Earth as my sun sign, as Capricorn, but we're so different in that way that I don't know, I suppose I relate to my Earth in that it keeps me grounded, because otherwise I would be just totally, I don't know where I'd be, because I'm Aquarius and Sagittarius, so there's fire and air.
Yeah, which that makes sense. That makes sense when I think about you, because you the wind blows and you're off, or the wind blows.
Fired up.
Yeah,
fired up.
The wind blows and you're kind of, oh, something new, but then there's this fire, there's this passion with it. So it's like this. You're like a forest fire, going around, blazing here and then smoldering and then blazing off in that direction. But yeah, there is that earth. That, I guess that's where we connect.
You speak to my earth and you go, "Hey, earth," and I'm like, "What? No." And then
yeah,
like,
and it's where you challenge me, is that fieriness. That's where
I
I'm.
think
It's
you
the
do
edges
have
of my
fire.
comfort.
You do have fire in your chart because Mum has looked into it. You do. It's not something that you just don't have, but it's something that challenges you. Like I would say, probably water challenges me. I think the most. That kind of.
Yeah, what, so describe watery people then, because I had this idea of Aquarius that's totally wrong. So what's the watery?
Pisces.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, but what are the characteristics, the sort of generalized characteristics of those, the people with watery signs?
it's very able to process emotions, which is good. You know, they can just continuously kind of move through their emotions and, you know, let them out. Um, and I feel like that's something that I've always had to connect in with. You know how some people, they just have it, it's just on tap. It's like they can turn on the tap and just the emotions will flow. Whereas I have to really connect, you know, like go there.
Deep plumbing.
Yeah, which I found, you know, it's really good to learn to know yourself in that way because then you just know how to help yourself more. So with me, if I'm feeling emotional, if I feel like you know, I want to be more, I will like watch a film or put on a song or have something that then can help me release. Um, but yeah, water signs are able to process emotions and just be able
Okay,
to
so they're very quick to have emotional, or they might even be living in that
yeah.
totally emotional universe where, you know, in a perhaps in a more kind of unhealthy sense, they can just get carried away all the time by their emotions or have no control, or
Yeah.
but it's very close to the surface. Whereas you're saying with you have to kind of consciously go and
Yeah.
access it and activate it or do a bit of work to sort
Yeah.
of make it happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I'm
probably
off. You
like
know,
that.
I'm up here, I'm off. I'm airing, I'm firing, or I'm earthing. I'm like, well, I don't know where the water is. I have to be really conscious of it. Because otherwise I'd just be, you know, I would burn through it.
Yeah,
That's not where.
you've either turned it into steam, blown it away into clouds, or like soaked it all up. You know.
I burn it. That's how I see with emotion. I actually do. The fire kind of, there's a deep fire in there that I have to yeah, I have to connect with the element of water. And I love it because I love water. Love being in water. I love watching water and its fluidity. So that's just the one element that I would have to, that I need to consciously go and kind of be around actually.
Yeah, I think I have a strong affinity for water. I love that flowingness. That's a very natural state for me when I'm not rooted and grounded and stuck in that way. I can really flow in that way, in a quite sort of, there's a lot of pleasure. I think that's when I've kind of, on the other side of this idealist I've been for a long time. If you look at that Enneagram kind of universe, there is this kind of pleasure seeking person, and that's all about flow, and it's very sensual water, and I totally relate to that. You know, and when probably one of my favorite um, feelings dancing and in five rhythms is the flowing rhythm, where
Yeah.
it's just on and on and on and on. It's endless, and I love music like that, where it's kind of quite trancy and you go on a journey, but there's no sharp edges. It's just rolling, and you know, like a river around sort of rocks and boulders as it goes down the mountain. That energy, that feeling of the sort of tumbling controlled, in a way, controlled fall, but only just controlled, the minimum of control. It's this, it's not even control, it's more just awareness of where you're going. You're very present to the movement, but you're not stopping it, and you're not particularly directing it. It's almost a dance between this greater thing and you, and you're surrendering yourself to this bigger energy, and in a kind of harmonious dance with it. Such a wonderful feeling. I love that feeling.
Five rhythms is an important thing to talk about because we've both done a lot with that. I mean, I started with ecstatic dance when I was in Bali. That was the first time I had experienced anything
Tell
like
me
that.
about that, because I don't really know that. I mean, I know ecstatic dance from clubs in Manchester and, you know, way back in, but not ecstatic dance, you know, more drug and drink fueled or just youth fueled. But talk a bit about what that is, or what your experience was.
It's getting your energy up, and it's really, for me, it was really intense because when I started it, I just stopped drinking and I just went cold turkey, and I had such a reaction to it because obviously all of the insecurities came up that I was shoving down with the alcohol, you know, for years. And suddenly I was in this place where I was like, oh my God, I feel so vulnerable. And I remember that feeling. And then I just got into it. It's like you just go. It's like you're moving, and it's so powerful for moving energy. And it's not about, you know, necessarily how you're moving. And there really isn't any flow to it, unlike five rhythms. It's more of you kind of pick up. They sort of build it. But I just remember a lot of just jumping and everyone sort of just sweating, and it's just more about getting your energy up. And it processed a lot for me really quickly. Um, so yeah, I did a few of those in Bali, and it just like moved. And for me, via movement, that I think I'm more of a I need to get my energy up person. So that worked for me really well. And also you can have cacao before, which is you know, stimulates you and
Yeah,
opens your
that
heart.
they're the drugs, right? It's a drug, of course it is.
Yeah.
Good, but it's a much purer drug. It's kind of
Yeah.
heart opening and
Mm.
energizing, stimulating. But it's like the sort of natural MDMA or something, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
it opens people's hearts and connects people. So there's a kind of loving
Yeah.
feeling that's associated with it.
And it's stimulating because the caffeine. It goes
Yeah. Oh yeah.
me. Um, but yeah, that was my experience of ecstatic dance, and
So
you
it's
know,
more.
having shifted energy quickly.
It's more of a kind of driving.
Yeah.
There's so much in this, and this is ancient technology, because if you look at any existing traditions, indigenous traditions, you'll find kind of dancing or drumming and dancing
Yeah.
where you just keep doing it, and you
Yeah.
might do it for like 12 hours
Mhm.
until something breaks, and you might go into a trance or an altered state, or something happens. But there's something about just kind of moving the body. And this is where it's fascinating, because all of these things are forms of kind of somatic work, where, because our bodies are the containers for everything really
Mhm.
that we are, a lot of our experiences, our traumas, our emotions are held physically in kind of muscles contracted, or posture, or just memories, you know, kind of felt memories within certain parts of the body. And what dancing seems to do, and you know, especially when you add in energy from music, and especially when you have repetitive music, it seems to kind of shake and shake, just like if you shake something physical.
Mm.
Like if you get a jar of sugar where all the stuff at the bottom is kind of stuck together, we're a bit like that. But if you shake that jar, shake it, eventually all those little granules kind of loosen up and separate. And it's the same in us. You know, once we dance and dance and dance, those stuck bits of ourselves start to kind of loosen until things can get released. Oh, delivery.
Oh,
Let's have a pause. The Amazon man's just arrived.
always receiving delivery.
I'm not, so it's quite funny that he's arrived. Can I just pause it for a minute? Okay, we're back with chocolate. All that talk of chocolate and getting high and dancing, and now we're eating it. Yeah.
Tell me your brand.
Product placement. I'm eating Green and Black's 70% dark organic chocolate, which is a bit of a drug because the sugar, well, I say it's the sugar, it's the chocolate obviously too, but the sugar is a bit toxic for me.
That 70 we know is lethal because we would get through a bar in about a second.
Yeah.
That's how I tell how lethal chocolate is how balanced I can be with it.
Yeah, but the trouble, I like that 85, but the trouble with that is because I have so little self-control when it comes to sweet things from childhood, from the earliest times. I eat the 85 in just the same way that I eat the 70, and then I get fucking stupidly high, and it freaks me out. I get kind of anxious, and like, oh. It's like cocaine for me. I've never been good at stimulants, but
Where are you taking me?
Yeah. It's one of my great challenges is to learn a bit of self-control with. I'm pretty good. If it's not in the house, I can not go and buy it.
If I'm not there,
if it's
all
here,
right.
Yeah, or if you're not around. But if it's here, I'll just eat it.
Well, so, I mean, it's like I come equipped with chocolate now. Wherever I go, it's like I just bring the chocolate.
Yeah, you're like a vending machine for chocolate.
No, but then I always wanted to be the woman in Pilar.
Oh yeah.
So it kind of makes sense that I would just need to start making it. But this chili Montezuma, 74% organic chocolate. This is the first time I've tried this one, and the chili is really good. Just a little bit of chili.
Yeah, I like chili and chocolate.
God, because I live off chocolate, honestly. Even the raw, 100% no sugar. It has so much in it. There are so many vitamins and minerals that are essential. So for me, it's a superfood as well as delicious.
It's great. I love the way addicts kind of dress up their addiction.
No, I wasn't even the one who said that. That was, I think, Sarah.
You're saying it now.
Yeah, now I've taken it. I'm like, yeah, great. Now I've got a reason to.
I do have an addictive relationship to chocolate, which is why I haven't been eating much of it at all lately. I pretty much got it down to just having cacao nibs on my smoothies or my porridge in the morning. And I don't actually buy chocolate bars very often. It's usually when something's just happened and I'm feeling like, Jesus, the world's so fucked. I'm just going to go and get a chocolate bar. And when as far as vices go, I think it's pretty good. My vices these days are chocolate occasionally.
Peanuts.
Fizzy water and peanuts, which to most people that would sound ridiculous to call those vices. But that's pretty much it. I know, maybe you as well are a vice.
Yeah. I bring all of the chocolate with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, chocolate is my thing. I'm not into sweet things. If it's not chocolate, there's no point. And I have a real affinity with the cacao bean. I just think it's incredible and it's beautiful, it's amazing, and it's delicious, and it helps. It's medicinal. But I always have since I was a child, and I have to obviously relate it to being related to the Cadbury's family.
Oh yeah, you have Cadbury ancestry.
Yeah,
Although to put chocolate and Cadbury in the same name in same sentence now is absurd because
or Cadbury.
that's the least chocolate-like chocolate you can
I
get.
know. I'd like to have tasted it when it first
Yeah, what
came
in its
out.
original form.
It's been so polluted, and it
But
was.
I wonder, do you know, I don't know anything about the dates for Cadbury when they first set up their operation, but I wonder if it was sugar from the start because the sugarcane industry
Yeah,
in the kind of colonies would have been at the same time. So perhaps it was always sugary shit, right from the start.
thanks.
No, the Cadbury. I don't know enough about the Cadburys, but I think they had some sort of altruistic aspects to them as well, didn't they?
Established in Birmingham in 1824. But they were Quakers.
With a Yorkshire accent.
Yeah, that's as close to Birmingham as I can do. Um, yeah,
Oh, they're Quakers. That was
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So a
So
bit of that kind of you've got a bit of the Quaker in you.
I'm missionary. I've
Yeah,
got a lot of missionary and Quaker blood from both sides of my family. So
yeah. You're a right handful. You're a zealot.
it makes sense.
You're an evangelist.
I don't know what I am. I think we're all I think we're everything, I've realized. Everyone has every aspect of everything that we are experiencing right now. Every religion, every color, every belief, every country. It's like we're all made up of all of it. And I feel like our cells are doing that thing you're talking about when
Shaking loose.
dancing. It's like everyone's started moving and all of the energies are kind of just doing this. And it's about finding that place where we can actually get comfortable with everything moving so that the sugar can be like shaken out and the granules can come back into balance and have some space, and that's how it feels actually what we're going through.
Yeah, and and perhaps that's a necessary state before things can start to come together again and
Yeah,
coalesce and sort of form little clumps. Perhaps
chaos.
in the life cycle, a greater life cycle of what's going on culturally, everything's been shaken and atomized so that it can be reborn in different forms. That feels quite right to me as a way of looking at things. And perhaps this idea that we all contain everything, it's a potential, I think. Perhaps we don't manifest it
Yeah.
or live it, but there is this potential
Mm-hmm.
for all of those forms of expression. Just like you have all of good and all of evil in you in potential.
Mm-hmm.
You could this idea that some people are just evil and others are not seems absurd to me because I feel like we've all got the potential for all of those things, and given the right circumstances,
Yeah.
context, you too might become that
Mm.
particular manifestation of evil, and also good or a kind of enlightened being. So it feels, yeah, that makes sense, and
Yeah.
it gets us back to the dancing thing and the movement thing, which there's a little bit more in that I'm interested in maybe exploring, because I think it's really vital
Mm.
this time, which is, we talk a lot about the earth and our connection with the earth, and I've got this whole belief now, having really lived it for quite some years now, that this reconnecting with the earth and where you live
Mm.
is an essential part of anything that we'll take forwards from now. And it's the forgetting and the absence of that connection to the land and place and the living web of life that's put us into this kind of critical place of near extinction, and it's allowed us to destroy environments because we've become so detached from the environment that we don't even realize how much we're a part of it and depend on it. And we've been consuming it and turning it into money or into profit, into numbers in a computer. And this recovery of connection with the land seems to me such a vital part of any future we're going to have, of a kind of falling in love with the land where you are and all its local beauty and uniqueness. And the only way to do that is through the body. And we've become so detached from our bodies in the West. We've got so into our heads, as we've talked about before. And the thing about dancing or any movement meditation or movement practice or kind of martial art, or even a lot of sports, if not all sports to a certain degree, they bring us back into our bodies. And the reason why exercising, whether it's going to the gym or whatever you do, is so good is because you are moving all of this stuckness, all of these kind of traumas, these emotions that always gather up and collect in day-to-day life. You're shaking them out and resetting. A dog reset. I always loved watching a dog. A dog, something stressful happens to a dog and it will just do that kind of body shake and then it will carry on. And they do, if you watch animals, they do it all the time, because whenever something lands on them, they process it immediately so they can get back into that total ready state of relaxed readiness. Animals are great teachers, dogs especially for that. So it's that sort of dog reset, I call it. This is what makes dancing so wonderful. So it's like a form of continuous therapy that you can do, that's easy to do and it's pleasurable. And if you do it enough, you can get into altered states, and there's a whole other universe to explore there. But just for day-to-day life, just the joy, the physical joy of movement and exercise, it always improves your mood. It always kind of, if you're full of sugar or bad food, it helps to kind of process some of that, get rid of any stuck feelings, it's a wonderful thing. One of the most enjoyable things I've ever done.
Yeah, it's definitely
Is
my
dance as a
favorite.
child, as a kind of young adult as well. Like it was all mixed up with, drugs and drinking and the music, but the music and the dancing was so important when I was growing up. I had really blissful experiences from the dancing, from the music and dancing combined. And despite being full of alcohol or whatever it was, I could still have these profound, ecstatic experiences.
Quite interesting to also see the difference between men and women when it comes to dancing, because there's such a lot of baggage around women in dancing. I mean, there is for both of us in terms of, judgment and how you dancing and you look good, especially for women, and especially the culture we've been living in. Like, you go to clubs, you go to the VIP room, get dressed up, and you only move in a way that looks good, that looks inviting, to kind of exploit yourself. There's a lot of that for women, and I really never really bought that for myself, because I just love moving. But it's something I had to unpack. There was a lot of that when I started ecstatic dance when I was in Bali, that all those fears came up, all of those programs that even if I didn't believe, had been pushed into me. And all of this, like, how do I look? What are people going to think? How am I going to cope with this? Just the embarrassment as well of it all. So when you can get through that, because I've also known people who don't dance, they just go, I don't dance. Like, why? Like, let's get back to the root of why do you not dance? It's There's so much judgment around the way in which people move. And what's amazing about ecstatic dance and five rhythms and authentic movement is that it's about coming into your body and understanding your body away from judgment and limitation. It's about really empowering your physical body and your physicality and what you can do and how, it works as a piece of technology. And I feel like that's really important to bring awareness to, because there's so much fear around moving. And, I feel so liberated that I don't feel like that anymore. And I can just, I mean, I've always been able to just get up and dance anyway, but especially now, when I don't drink. And I remember going to a wedding and just being like, well, everyone else is absolutely plastered. But thankfully, I don't care that I'm not drunk because I love dancing. There are all these like layers at which we can consciously bring awareness to and ask ourselves, why am I limiting myself?
Mm.
Because there's so much that is available. There's so much potential in just in lots of areas, but I would definitely say dancing has just been the most liberating thing for me, and really going with the flow and exploring. And it's helped me heal a lot of the limitations and the judgments of others, because when you go to those places you realize you're actually okay, and nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to die. People are going to kind of point and laugh at you, especially in those places. That's what's amazing about authentic movement and ecstatic dance and five rhythms, is that it's safe, it's held. So if you go there, you know that it's going to be a different experience. If you go to a club, you don't know what's going to happen. It's not the same thing. You're not in a held space.
Mm.
So I would say to people, if you're interested in exploring moving your body and getting out of your head and the limitations, and really starting to honor what your body does for you, go and explore, ecstatic dance, authentic movement, five rhythm.
Yeah, it's interesting because I, as a kid especially, I was excruciatingly self-conscious.
Mm.
And I can remember being horrified by like a school disco. It was so uncomfortable for me. It was just so intense
Yeah.
that I couldn't engage in it. I mean, it was overwhelming. So I just didn't engage in it. And I was that person as a child,
Mm.
but I don't know how. Maybe it was alcohol that kind of took down the barrier so that I could be in that space long enough to realize how much I loved it.
Yeah.
So I could actually have this incredible experience and know, wow, I do actually love dancing. And beyond that self-consciousness, when that drops away, there is this joy, like just pure joy in potential. I mean, it can be really like emotional and disturbing if kind of energies and things come out from traumas, but there's so much potential for joy there.
Mm.
And it's all about self-image or kind of some idea of, oh, what will people say, or if I move in a certain way, what does that say about me? So there's all that bullshit in the way of it. But if you can somehow have the courage step up and do it and get through that to that place where you're not self-conscious, because like any of these things, maybe you do, when you are all uptight and you do look fucking ridiculous and uptight when you're dancing, and it's painful to watch, so you're justified in a way to be self-conscious. But once you break through that and you're in your kind of liberated joy, it doesn't matter what your body shape, what your age, because when you watch somebody who's really just doing their movement, it's the most beautiful thing you could ever see. It's joyful, and it has a kind of, it feeds other people. They get to feel good because they can see that you're just free in those moments, that And it is a freedom. It's this incredible, like, liberation is a great word. It's,
Yeah.
they're probably the freest I've ever felt has been dancing. It's just been lost in the music, and
Mm.
I'm not even thinking about anyone else or what I look like, or
Yeah.
I'm just feeling this fucking great feeling, and
Yeah.
I'm totally in tune with the music, and you know, and I know it, and I can feel this sense of, and I can even then become aware of people watching me, and
Mm.
instead of my default self-consciousness, I actually get to experience what people who like to have attention
Mm.
must feel like, because I can recall moments now of dancing where I know I'm totally on the music and in
Mm.
my flow, and it's pure pleasure, and I can see that that's giving other people pleasure, and that just makes me feel great about myself. And
Yeah.
that was such a revelation for me, because I never had that feeling of comfort with everyone's looking at me. Quite the opposite. I just want to, like, no, go away, you know.
Yeah. It reminds me of when we went, our best night together was dancing outside at a friend's party and just honestly letting rip. And it was exactly that, wasn't it? We were kind of welcoming people in because there was so much stickiness about, judgment. And we just went right in and we were like, we're in our flow and let's go. And it was just such a euphoric feeling because we were
And
together.
sober, no drugs, just
Yeah,
pure, like, you know, nothing in the way of it. So we weren't kind of using any crutches. We were just in it. Yeah, it
it was
was joy,
amazing. We were in
total joy.
total creation. We
Yeah,
were co-creating in its deepest, most pure essence.
yeah.
And
It's a creative. It's an art form. When you get to that place, it is. It becomes an art form because you are creating
mhm,
visual, physical, felt art, an
mhm,
expression and communication with yourself, each other, this greater thing, other people.
yeah,
It's an incredible. It's just like creates a new space in reality. Those things, those moments, just like when you witness or you're a part of some incredible performance by a great singer, or
mm,
you know, a dancer, or so. It creates this space in reality where the true divine beauty of nature just reveals itself,
mm,
and everyone knows that when they witness it and they feel it. And that's why great artists are celebrated, or and why it's so difficult sometimes for people who are performers, because they have to go to that place and they have to, like, do whatever they can to get in the state of mind and body that they can then deliver this incredible energetic thing for everybody else,
mm,
which can be a hard road to walk. And lots of people don't succeed, and they get into all kinds of problems with drugs and drink and, you know, sex addiction and whatever else, because of the kind of response it has,
mm.
because it's so attractive to people. But
Uh,
people then start projecting all their best wishes onto you and kind of, you know, make you into a god that you're not, and all of that stuff gets thrown in. But
yeah,
it's powerful, powerful stuff.
it is. It is. And when I was performing when I was young, when I was 18, it was so fucking intense. I just went, nah, I can't do this. I wasn't centered enough in myself to be able to hold and withstand the energy that you receive when you are putting yourself in that place of sharing what's coming through, because it's such a vulnerable place, because it's your heart, it's your expression. And I feel like that was actually my journey, was to really let go of those limitations that I was experiencing, the judgment and the shame and the having to wanting to please people. And yeah, and when I was performing I was just drunk all the time. It was just like, just get me out of my physical body and I will be able to then transcend those fears so that the thing can come through. But then because you're so out of it, you don't know what it sounds like. 'Cause in your head it might sound great, but then it might not. And I remember some performances I did, you know, I was throwing off pieces of clothing. I remember throwing off a hat into the audience and then picking up a guitar. I don't play the guitar. And just starting to kind of go blah, 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 like just awful. So it's performance, yeah, it's interesting. And you have to, it requires a lot of presence and sitting with yourself. So we talk a lot about Bob Dylan because he really embodied and still embodies the kind of shaman energy, which is allowing, you know, his expression to come through, the divine expression of him to come through. And I mean, there are lots of people who do it, but he's for some reason our favorite.
Yeah, well, super
So powerful.
yeah.
And yeah, I feel like I now relate to it with my healing when I do healing and when I hold space for other people in that way. I can do it, and with my voice and with the sound. But it is it's a very challenging, you know, place to be, is allowing your art to come through you, whatever that is, you know, whether you're a creative person or, you know, you're more of a practical person. We all have art that wants to come through us, and it's our expression. And finding a space where within ourselves we feel comfortable enough to share that is the journey, really. And that's, I feel like, what we're stepping more into now. Is it's really for us to find these expressions that are ours and be confident enough to share them, because they're really needed. They're really needed right now.
Yeah. Well, it's good you bring up this kind of your early experience and Bob Dylan, because that, to me, that illustrates the spectrum of it. So, you know, what made your early performance experiences so harrowing in a way was that because you were young and inexperienced and you didn't quite perhaps know how to deal with this creative force that was coming up through you. There's also this kind of ego attachment, like it's about you. It's like, oh, I'm the performer, I'm the great artist, people are here to see me, and all that pressure on yourself kind of is crippling. And that's the thing that traps loads of people, is that they can't get out of the way, get themselves out of the way to allow this energy through, which is this kind of greater divine creative energy. And all the great artists, and this is the journey of any artist, I think, is to learn how to get your small self to one side and understand that you're just this vehicle for this thing that wants to come through. And the more seamlessly you can allow that to flow through you and not get stuck on attaching it to your ego, then you become someone like Bob Dylan, who somehow managed early on, you know, for sure everyone has ego issues and has to wrestle with that, but he somehow managed to understand very early on what was going on and knew how to separate his small self from his, you know, conduit to this energy. So when he did perform, he was just channeling it cleanly. And it's so powerful when you see that, because of that, you know. And the only issues he or anyone else has is when the ego starts to get involved or confuses the greatness of what's going on with this little part of themselves. And, you know, the audience confuse that and start to worship this person and don't understand that it's actually the thing they're communicating that is the amazing thing. And we all contain the potential to channel this thing, because it's in everyone. It's the very essence of the universe. It's what everything's made of, you know. So when you're that young performer who feels this incredible upwelling of creativity and wants to quite naturally put that out in the world, but doesn't understand that it's not you, and so has to put the little afraid wounded you on the stage and feel like, oh my God, I'm the one who has to hold this and carry the responsibility. You know, that's overwhelming. So that, I think we've all probably had issues with that, you know. I've kind of struggled with it in the other way, where I've had this energy come through, but the small self has been so afraid to kind of show itself in the world that I've not shared it, or I've shared it like remotely or secondhand, or like I'll make something. You know, when I was making a lot more sculpture, those moments in the studio where it was being created were just pure bliss for me, because I disappeared and I was just a witness to this thing becoming. You know, these hands of mine and this imagination were in this kind of communion with this, you know, creator energy, with this mysterious spirit. And these incredible things were just appearing before me. And the making was the art. As soon as I'd made it, I had no feeling for it. And then it just became a burden. And then I had the whole burden of, well, how do I interface with the world?
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to share it because that felt right. But the whole kind of practical and social mechanics of sharing it, I had no interest in or skill for. And so I always put things out there in a quite crap way. I didn't put in the work. I couldn't be, you know, even if I set up some kind of exhibition after the opening of it, I just lost interest in it. It was like, because it was done for me. I'd already finished and moved on. I was looking for the next creative experience, you know, those moments in the studio, or where I would see something that kind of lit up for me, an object in the world that I knew I wanted to do something with it, or that was the art for me, was somehow the experience. And I did, you know, later on I wondered whether it might be more interesting in some ways in terms of the community, for artists to be sharing their process more, where everyone has access to seeing art being created and maybe hearing them talking about what's going on. And then there might be more of a sense of connectedness between the population and artists, because certainly in fine arts or visual arts in the West, there's such a kind of distance between the population and art. It's often viewed as just fucking something stupid by most of the population, by some pretentious kind of, you know, up itself thing. And for good reason. For good reason.
So it's intellectualized because we're so separated.
Exactly.
So if you're involved in the process of the felt experience of it, you would be able to relate to it. But when it's, you know, it's like that kind of cold thing that's just then an object, that really you have to bring your intellect to it to sort of figure out what it is, because you're not feeling it in its process, but then you still feel something because you receive something from the art, but it's a whole different, it's like this controlled feeling. It's like, how do I feel about this because of the colors or because of the composition, and how do you think they were feeling about it? And those weird conversations fucking art historians bang on and on and on about of, oh yes, but they were thinking this in this moment, and can't you see that this is what they were doing? It was, when I did a history of art, I was just like, what the actual fuck? How are we trying to intellectualize anyone's creative process, and how bizarre and controlling that felt, which kind of makes sense because it's like the society and culture has been trying to control everything and manipulate it in a way that it makes sense. It's got to all make sense in that very rational way, and it's, yeah.
Well, as usual, you've gone right to the heart of it. One of your great talents. That's one of your great talents. One of the things I love about you is that you get right. You really see stuff in that way. That's exactly it. Because we've been rationalizing everything. That's our legacy. That's the Christian Renaissance scientific legacy is that we got stuck in our heads and in the rational, and even in the left side of our heads, the rational side, you know. And this whole intellectualizing of art, and then you need this priesthood, the art critics, the kind of people who know with good taste, to interpret the work of the artist for the general population so they can understand what the art is really about. Like it was a fucking, like it's a fucking crossword puzzle that unless you were clever enough, you couldn't understand it. It's total bullshit. Art is about lived experience. When you stand in front of a painting, it's your experience of the painting that's unique to you in that moment, in that context of where you are. That's the art. All those fucking ideas, yeah, it's a kind of, maybe that's an art form in itself, writing about art, but it's not the authority on art. Art is a purely subjective experience, and it should be experienced firsthand. And then if it's good art, for me, it's really simple. There's just art that works and art that doesn't. And it's not about intentions or even like craft skills, which is a whole other universe and has validity in all of itself. You know, crafting and making things beautifully is a form of art too. But that pure communication of the divine, of what it is to be human and conscious and alive and in the world, that you get from great art, where you stand in front of a painting and you just feel this incredible force of life and energy. That's all there is to say about it. You can go off and explain it and write words down, but you could also just feel it and know as much, if not more, about that piece of art than the greatest art historian. And you know, it's so important that you bring that up, because I feel like all art is misunderstood generally in our culture, because it's translated into rational thought. Yeah, how can you rationalize Beethoven or fucking Picasso? Or it's bollocks. No,
it's see where you've been living in this whole system for how many years?
Well, I haven't, because I never really got involved. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I couldn't get involved with the art world, really. Because that was all bollocks to me. But there was also kind of confidence, personal issues as well. I can't just pretend or blame it on that. That was always something that really I fought against right from the start, because I could see it was bollocks, you know. And it's not that I'm not guilty of, because I would also, you know, there is a kind of, you know, to counter the argument, there is something really satisfying and stimulating in creating thoughts and ideas and writing or coming up with words when talking about art. And it is in itself an art form, I think. Because I can have those responses where it's, you know, and I, even when making art, there is this kind of pure creative thing that's physical going on, but there is an intellectual dimension, and I'll be informing what's being made by thoughts and ideas and stories and imaginations and relationships between things, you know. And I might use words or name something, or so I'm not excluding the rational. I'm not saying that it's not a part of it, but it's not entirely, and it certainly isn't the lens through which to understand art. And you know, just like with religion, where religion has priests who are intermediaries between you and God, and you have to be in a church and have the priests, or this kind of hierarchy, the priesthood, in order to kind of meet God. And that's bullshit too. It's like, no, you have a relationship with God in whatever form it manifests for you, or you experience it. It's nobody else's business to interpret that. Just so with art is for you directly, and the art that you respond to is the art for you, and its validity is that you feel something. And if you don't feel that, you don't need to knock it down or say it's shit or it's not real art. It's just not the right art for you. And it may be that it isn't art. You know, there's a lot of bullshit out there that isn't art, that's that's a product of the intellectual, but
Mm.
it's not a product of a person communing with this greater than self thing.
Yeah.
And but it doesn't matter, because you may be wrong. You may look at something and go, oh, that's not fucking art, that's just somebody wanking or up in their head somewhere. But it could also be a limitation of or outside of your realm of experience. So better to just say, well, it doesn't work for me, than
Yeah.
to attack it, because you get a lot of that in the art world, like, no,
Yeah.
that's not art, this is art.
Well, we get attached, don't we? We get emotional. It's like us just getting emotional about the system and art historians. And it's always important to, yeah, come back and go,
Yeah,
and then,
projection, it's all projection,
it's,
isn't it?
yeah, but it's important to bring it up because
Mm.
that's something that we've both been, navigating through our lives because we are both creatives and want to share that in the world. But it's been a challenge to come up against this kind of cold, um, definitive kind of this is the way that you have to do it. And it's a life lesson, isn't it? And just trying to kind of find your way, which I think, we coming together, we've probably done the most. I mean, I know I have. I've seen myself more clearly since we've been together than before. Um, and that's holding space for one another and, going deeply into living art, living, breathing, and becoming your own art so that you understand it, which is what we've both been doing together. And then it becomes less um, outside of you, it becomes you, doesn't it?
Well,
Which is
you
part of.
opened up this whole next bit now. This is what I'm loving about conversation, is this is an art form.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's such a creative act,
Mm.
conversation, when you're not forcing your opinions and fighting your corner, when you're genuinely open to kind of a collaborative exchange.
Mm.
We go on this wonderful journey, and now you've just opened up this whole vast hall for us to walk through, which is making art of life, which is something that is such a deep part of both of us. And one of the things that maybe brought us together in the first place,
Mm.
because we have a kind of instinctive, it's like a default setting, I think, that
Mm.
we want to create beauty in our surroundings, in the physical sense, in the things that we have around and the way we arrange them and the way we relate to them, in the greater sense of the environment, because we both have that response to the beauty in nature, and want to kind of almost create theater, out of life, where in relationship we're kind of writing a play
Mm.
in our interactions, and there's always this aesthetic and creative aspect to everything we're doing, it feels like to me. And
Mm.
I wonder if that isn't just an inherently human thing, when
Mm.
it's liberated, when it's allowed to exist without self-consciousness or control, that we all perhaps in potential have this impulse to just create beauty. Maybe that is the default setting for humans when they're not traumatized, is to experience the divine beauty of reality and then to create beauty as
Mm.
a kind of um,
Honoring.
honoring and homage, or whatever it is, where you just kind of like, as a kind of worship, in fact, like,
That
oh my god,
devotion.
yeah, devotional, like, it's so beautiful, I just want to express how beautiful it is to be alive. And that it's such an important thing. I get so much joy, pleasure, security, inspiration from living those moments when things align, where the pressures, like the more harrowing pressures of the world, like money pressures or political situation or whatever's going on, isn't kind of imposing too much, and or personal demons even, when all of that is in some sort of balance, and just this pure creativity can arise. And we, you know, we might make a meal together. Some of the meals we've had together have been works of art, have been beautiful works of art. You know, the whole process of going out, getting, you know, maybe going to the market, meeting people, having these wonderful exchanges, being out in the world, gathering these wonderful ingredients, you know, maybe something inspirational that we weren't looking for appears, bringing that together, coming home. And if it's in the summer, maybe we're outside, you know, setting the table with some beautiful things like some nice candlesticks and, you know, maybe some crystals of yours, or even something from nature, you know, some flowers that we found, or some pine cones, or whatever it is, and creating this setting, dressing the set. And then the whole kind of creative collaboration of cooking, and, you know, and even the kind of power dynamics of that, like, will Georgie allow me to do something? You know, will I have to, or me, like, will I let Georgie just like pour the tin of beans straight into the pan, or will it freak me out if she doesn't rinse it first under the tap? You know, so that those kind of things, but they become part of the art, part of the dance of it. And then making this incredible meal that's just been created on the spot, no recipes, just purely intuitively. And then, you know, we'll probably be dressed up in a certain way, you know, which is something that you're extremely talented at, is kind of finding and bringing in the clothes as well. And then we sit down and we share this pleasurable, sensual experience of eating, and inevitably go into a conversation that kind of just ices the cake. And then, you know, to finish it all off, there'll be some crack cocaine chocolate or something at the end, just to kind of get force that last bit of pleasure in, because we're so full already.
Wow.
But, you know.
Gosh, it's quite Mad Hatter, quite Alice in Wonderland, as hearing you describe what we do. And, you know, we've also learned a lot about ourselves, I think, through meeting our control, which is exactly what you were saying with, will Georgie let me, will she even let me do anything? And will I let her, you know, put the wood on the fire or whatever? It's like we've really had to meet each other in all of these places. And that's actually almost, that just makes me laugh. I just laugh at it, because we're so uptight actually as people. You know? In our creative process, we're very uptight because we know how we like it. And, you know, lots of people are like that, but some people are, you know, a little bit more messy with their creation process. Like you and I are just like so anal that it's been actually a relief in lots of ways to be doing it together and kind of loosen some of that control up, because it's tiring, it's exhausting. You know, we'd be doing some event or something that, do you remember when you helped me in some of the workshops where I was doing the food, dressing the space, holding the workshop, and then clearing up and everything afterwards, and just how exhausted I was. Absolutely fucking exhausted, and like on the edge of breaking down. And actually through that, and through you holding the space, I kind of saw myself in, oh, this isn't healthy. You know, this isn't actually a good way of being, because it upsets me. I want to be enjoying the process as well. So we sort of help one another get to a more fluid, maybe relaxed place. I do think that's, for us personally, that is our challenge, is relaxing. That's what we have to
tempering the perfectionist. It's because the perfectionist is ruthless, and it's when you've gone too far that way, and that kills art just as much as being too kind of careless and messy about it. It's definitely finding that center ground where there's just enough looseness to let the flow of nature and the world in, to kind of embellish what you're doing, but not too much that it kind of falls apart or just becomes quite mediocre. And it's definitely that certainly for me, and I see it in you too, that the perfectionist, the number of times I've done things and I've just driven myself into the ground trying to produce this thing, to the point where when it's finally happening, I'm so exhausted that I can't actually complete it in a good way, which is engaging in a very calm and welcoming way with the audience or the participants, because I'm so fucking exhausted, and it's not perfect because it never can be. So there's this massive disappointment that I've not achieved the goal that I set out to achieve, and the experience then for the audience is they come to see something and you just got this really upset, fucking uptight, pretentious arsehole who's not happy with what you're about to receive, and it's like you've already spoiled it for them. So I don't do that so much now. I used to do that a lot when I was younger, but I do think we kind of see that and mirror that in each other, and it helps us avoid it. I don't think we really do that anymore, or there's always somebody to say, hang on a minute, now we just need to let it flow.
Well, we stopped, didn't we? We stopped doing that because we needed to have a break, and it's now what is emerging that's the new way of creating, having healed a lot of that stuff together and having to go through it, because you do have to go through it, whatever it is. We have to go through these processes to understand that that's what's running our lives. And I do think, there's a lot of creative people who are doing that and actually not enjoying themselves, and a lot of people doing, their jobs and not enjoying themselves, but especially going through the process of just having to get stuff done and like being really hard on themselves, and then when it's actually done they're still not happy, and it's just this consistent discontentment with their lives because of the procrastination or the perfectionism or the the control inside their head and their ego saying that it's never going to be good enough. And if you're running that program, it's fucking exhausting, and you don't have to be living like that. I think that's really important to receive. If that's, if you're like that, you can get past it, you can get through that. You're never going to stop it, because we can't stop these aspects of self because they're all part of us, but it's learning how to see it and witness it and go, oh, okay, that's just a little voice in my head saying,
assimilate and kind of find a way to use it in a positive way, and bring it into harmony with the rest of you. I do consider myself a recovering idealist and a recovering perfectionist, and it's one day at a time.
And gosh, you've been through it with the ideas, and I feel like the next video we can talk more about what we've both created in that way, because that's quite interesting as to what your process of coming to where you are, like what were you doing and how were you feeling about yourself, because that can be really helpful and insightful.
Yeah, we could do some stories about our journeys maybe. Great. Well, that seems like a good place to leave it, right?
Yeah, we've been like
nice
40 minutes.
I have to say that those long extended rants were brought to you in association with Green and Black's dark chocolate. I could feel, it's funny, I can feel the kind of energizing, okay, you're ranting now, you're ranting. But it's a bit of a kind of, it's a bit like a sort of solo maybe in music or something. I hope it's not just like bullshit pouring out, but I feel like there's enough kind of sense of, okay, I'm still making sense, at least to me, and hopefully, But,
well, you're passionate. That's what comes through.
Well, there's my little bit of fire that comes out when it, when it's.
You do. It's when I have to do that thing of going and relax, and then he goes, Okay.
Where's the off switch? Where's the off switch? Somebody. Yeah.
I actually do go boop on your head sometimes.
Yeah. No, you
I
do.
think that's actually something that we should all do. Boop. Okay. I'm relaxed.
Sleep. Sleep. Standby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
thank
thank
you very
you.
much.
That was rich.
Yeah. Great. Chocolate always makes it rich.
Always.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.